The 1994 OJ Simpson case was one of the 20th century's most infamous murder trials. It ranks up there with the Charles Manson killings, the Lindenberg baby, and the Zodiac killer. The former football star and actor was accused of the murders of his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her friend Ronald Goldman. The pair were found stabbed to death in Brown's apartment in Brentwood, Los Angeles. When Simpson was found not guilty, America's collective jaw dropped. Even OJ's most ardent supporters might have felt deep down that Simpson would have been found guilty due to several damning pieces of evidence. Millions were glued to their TVs, watching the trial of the century, quote-unquote, forming opinions on his presumed guilt or innocence. And then just 2 years later, a civil court unanimously found Simpsons responsible for the deaths, and he was ordered to pay millions in damages to their families. The OJ case had it all. It was the first publicized case of DNA being used as evidence. Witnesses got their stories muddled, debates over racism and misogyny erupted, and the case ultimately hinged on one pair of ill-fitting gloves. So, let's break the case down. But first of all, who exactly is OJ Simpson? Simpson was a college football star in the late 1960s and shot to fame as a Hall of Fame running back within the Buffalo Bills in the 1970s. He managed to juggle his pro football success with an acting career, and by the late 1980s, Simpson was starring in films such as the smash Naked Gun comedy series. He married Nicole Brown in 1985, and life was good. It was to all come crashing down for both. Simpson and Brown's marriage was a turbulent one. Police were regularly called to their house to settle domestic disputes, and in 1989, Simpson was formally charged with assaulting Brown. The couple had 2 children, and Simpson had 3 other kids from his previous marriage. Throughout their marriage, Simpson had been involved in a number of affairs, most of which Nicole knew about. Finally, in 1992, Brown filed for divorce. She was paid a settlement of $433,000 plus monthly child support. In the spring of 1994, Brown met Ron Goldman, and the two hit it off straight away. Nicole was a striking blonde, and at 35 was in her prime. Goldman was a good-looking waiter who typified the LA lifestyle, revolving around gyms and a busy social life. Despite the obvious rumors, Goldman insisted to his friends that they were just friends. Whatever the relationship was, Goldman was desperately unlucky to have been with Nicole at her apartment on the evening of June 12, 1994. At around midnight, Nicole's neighbors were alerted by her dog barking furiously with its legs splattered in blood. The neighbors approached the apartment cautiously and were horrified at what they found just outside the door. The bodies of Brown and Coleman were covered in blood, each with multiple stab wounds. Investigators later confirmed that Nicole Brown had been stabbed 12 times and Goldman 25 times. Next to Goldman's body was a large-sized left-hand glove and a knit cap. The killer's blood-drenched footsteps led to the back gate. Detectives also noticed smaller drops of blood near the footprints, indicating the killer had a wounded left hand. Brown and Simpson's 2 children were still sleeping in the apartment's upstairs bedroom. Meanwhile, OJ was due to fly from LA to Chicago that night for a golf tournament the following day. He was to fly out at 11:45 and had booked his limousine to pick him up at 10:25. However, when the driver arrived at Simpson's house, the lights were off and OJ's car was nowhere to be seen. He buzzed the intercom at the front gate, but nobody answered. He waited outside in the limo and then saw a male enter the Simpson house through the front door. Because of the darkness, the driver couldn't get a good look at the man, but described him as being roughly the same size as Simpson and dressed in black. Cato Kalin was an associate of Simpson and was staying in their guest house to the side of the main building. At around 10:40, Kalin heard loud bumps from the main house and got up to investigate. He noticed the limo waiting outside and let the driver in. At about 10:55, OJ came to the door, looking disoriented and claiming he'd overslept. He told the driver they could still make the 11:45 flight, and the 3 men started loading OJ's luggage into the limo. There were 3 suitcases and a backpack, which OJ insisted on handling himself. However, Simpson only checked in the 3 suitcases at LA Airport. Police questioned a witness who claims to have seen Simpson stuffing items from his backpack into a trash bin. At the Chicago hotel, staff recall Simpson asking for a Band-Aid because he'd cut his finger. Housekeeping also discovered bloodstains on his sheets. Back in LA, detectives had arrived at Nicole Brown's apartment. One of the detectives was Mark Furman, who knew Brown and Simpson from a domestic dispute back in 1985. Furman had arrived at the Simpson house to find OJ brandishing a baseball bat and threatening to kill Nicole. Furman had restrained Simpson, but Nicole declined to press charges. Now, Furman was at her murder scene, and he immediately thought of Simpson. He and another officer made their way to OJ's house. They noticed his white Ford Bronco parked at an odd angle outside the house. The car also had blood on the door. The police were worried about the blood, so they scaled the gate and let themselves in, meeting Kalin in the house. Kalin told them that Simpson had left for Chicago and relayed the previous evening's events. Police searched the house, and Detective Furman made a critical discovery: a blood-stained right-hand glove at the back of the house. It looked to be an exact match for the left-hand glove found at Nicole's apartment. A warrant was put out for Simpson's arrest, and on June 13th he was brought in for questioning. When asked about the cut in his left finger, OJ said he'd nicked it while in Chicago. Detectives then reminded him about the blood in his car, at which point Simpson said he must have cut his finger earlier but forgot how. DNA tests on blood found at the murder scene matched blood samples from Simpson. On June 17th, detectives decided to charge OJ with 2 counts of murder. The LAPD ordered Simpson to turn himself in. However, Simpson didn't show up at the arranged time. He'd been staying with a friend of his lawyer, and when police arrived at the house, they found what appeared to be suicide notes. OJ was declared a fugitive, and the LAPD began a citywide search. Simpson was finally spotted by Highway Patrol, riding in the back of his friend Al Cowling's white Bronco. Cowling shouted to police that OJ had a gun and was threatening to commit suicide. Police backed off, but continued their pursuit. By this stage, media outlets had been alerted, and helicopters began filming the chase, which was screened across America on live TV, virtually bringing the nation to an awestruck halt. Hundreds of Simpson's fans ran to the freeway, cheering him on in support as police tried desperately to contact him. They managed to call him on a cell phone, and after tense negotiations, Simpson agreed to return to his home in Brentwood. On June 20th, Simpson pleaded not guilty and was arraigned, before being held without bail. The case finally went to trial on November 9th of 1994. The prosecution was headed by Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden. Clark had already prosecuted 20 murder cases and was convinced Simpson was guilty because of his record of spousal abuse. From the outset, the prosecution was confident of getting a guilty verdict. Despite waves of support from OJ fans, they felt like there was enough incriminating evidence to convince the jury. Even though they had no actual witnesses on the night of the murders, they had DNA and hair fiber matches, a pair of bloodied gloves, plus plenty of people who could testify about Simpson's violence towards his ex-wife. The defense team had several strategies. Led by Robert Shapiro, they wanted to put doubt in the jury's mind by focusing on the timeline and whether OJ's car was at his house at the time of the murders. Another tactic was to question the credibility and character of not just the prosecution witnesses, but the investigating detectives. It was insinuated that the LAPD had well-publicized issues with racism, and this was another example of discriminating against a person of color. Of the 12 jurors assigned to the case, 9 were black. Los Angeles was still reeling from the riots that erupted just a few years earlier because of the infamous Rodney King beatings. But the prosecution went to work. First up were the witnesses, testifying against Simpson's abusive past. They included the 911 dispatcher and Nicole's sister, who had seen her sister bruised and distressed several times. Next was the ACE card, DNA samples. Clark and Darden cited blood and hair matches found at the murder scene and the Simpson home and car. This included blood found on black socks in OJ's bedroom, which a DNA expert said was almost definitely that of Nicole Brown. He said only one person in almost 7 billion had the same type. A muddled testimony from a defense witness also seemed to aid the prosecution. OJ's housekeeper claimed to have seen his car parked outside his home at around 10 p.m., but it was revealed that her initial statement made no mention of the car. But then, the wheels began to fall off the prosecution. OJ's defense team managed to get the investigating detectives to admit they hadn't collected evidence using proper procedures, such as changing into clean gloves for new samples. Detective Furman was accused of having a racist agenda and wanting to make a name for himself. When Simpson was asked to try on the bloodied gloves, he struggled to get them on. His lawyer even quipped to the jury, "If it doesn't fit, you must acquit." Finally, the defense team was able to arrange a field trip for the jury to both the murder site and the Simpson home. This was their big shot at portraying OJ as an upstanding and victimized citizen. Pictures of his girlfriend were even taken down and replaced with photos of black activists being arrested by white police. The trial came to an end in early October 1995, after nearly 12 months. On October 2nd, the jury met to decide their verdict. 10 of the 12 jurors agreed to acquit Simpson. The verdict was announced on October 3rd, as most of America came to a standstill. The decision sent shockwaves throughout the nation and around the world. Fans of Simpson celebrated that justice had prevailed, while others, convinced of his guilt, were left stunned. Brown and Goldman's families immediately went about securing a civil trial, and Simpson was back in court in October 1996. He was found responsible for the deaths and ordered to pay $33 million in damages. In 2017, Simpson was released from prison after being jailed for robbery. He now lives in a gated community near Las Vegas, where he plays golf most days and relaxes with his friends, a free man. The OJ Simpson case will always be remembered, not just for its controversy, but for how it truly divided a nation.